Welcome everyone to the Elokus podcast. And today we're starting a new discourse, Mazel Tov. We are beginning the fifth discourse called Shalach Lecha Anashim, which is the fifth discourse in the great book B'Shasha Hekdimu 5672. And we're breaking into the 140 discourses, which we said is altogether originally was 144. We knocked off 4. We're already going into the 140th, meaning the fifth. And then after we conclude this one, there will be only 139. That feels good. Now, this is going, we're going to start, we're going to learn the little introduction. And Ezra Hashem, we're going to start chapter 18. This part, see, the beginning and the heading of each discourse is not included in the chapters because the Rebbe, the author, inserted these beginnings and ends separately in addition to the actual discourse itself, which is one long continuation. Now, just to help us gain some grip on the sense of accomplishment, what we learned already, what we're heading towards, is important to know that the theme of the first 12 discourses of the book, which concludes with 48 chapters, okay? 12 discourses, 48 chapters altogether. We did 17 chapters. Okay, so we did a little more than, a little more than a quarter of the amount of chapters, are all developing the first primary theme of the discourse. And that is, as we discussed earlier, the concept called Or Pnimi, the internal light. That the internal light is different than the encompassing lights, even as it starts off in the Or Ein Sof. The Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, has already a dimension within the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum that lends itself later to be internalized lights. And that's the concept we've been learning earlier, that even in the Or, even in the light, there is some slight nuanced nuances which would later come out in a manifest way when these lights are going to settle into the vessels in a long evolution until they will get down to the vessels. But eventually they will, and that's because in a very benign way, these lights have already some nuance, and that is called Eses Spherois HaGenuzos, the 10 hidden spherois. And as we discussed earlier, that is the lower end of the Or Ein Sof. What does that mean? That within the Or Ein Sof itself, which means within the infinite light that was before the Tzimtzum, kind of the infinite light while it's still within God, within the Ein Sof, when there is a awakening or a desire, as it's called, alois haratzon, when there is when it comes into the desire of the Ein Sof to create worlds, immediately, instantaneously, there is an adjustment. And that adjustment means that there is already some parameters to the infinite light. It gets some guardrails in a very, very hidden way, deep inside of it, which already cordals off this intended light for the worlds from the rest of the boundlessness and unnuanced, infinite, abstract, utterly undefined light. It cordals it off, so to speak. It separates it, and that's where the 10 spheros begin to exist. And as we learned in last year, that is the shoresh of the kav, the root of later the thread of light that is going to reemerge after the tzimtzum. So in this, that's what we learned till now. And again, so this idea, this concept that the Or Pnimi, the internal light, even within the Ein Sof, is not pure Ein Sof, is going to be continuously developed throughout these 12 chapters. In mainly in the, not 12 chapters, in the 12 discourses. In the fourth discourse that we completed with 29 classes that we had just completed a little while ago, last week, in that discourse, we developed mainly this idea that there is tzior, there is light, there is some definition in the lights, and that they originate in the Or Ein Sof from the Esa Spheres Agnuzos, from the 10 hidden spheres that are hidden. And then we discussed various elements of that. In this discourse, he's going to continue discussing the source of the Kav called the Esa Spheres Agnuzos. He's going to give us a better understanding of them. How are they 10 while they exist in the Ein Sof? What is their state of existence? How can we say that they are really different one from the other? So we're going to get a better grip on the understanding of the existence of the 10 spheroids as they exist within the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Albeit the nether lower part of the Or Ein Sof, but yet it's still Or Ein Sof. So how do you have 10 sphirot in that state? So that is what we're going to learn about and get better understanding in this discourse. Discourse, of course, a little shorter than the old one, than the last one. Last one, I think, had 6 chapters in it, or 5, I think 6. This one only has 3. Okay, so here we go. Now, remember, the Rebbe was saying these discourses by the order of the week. He broke it down, a couple of chapters, each time delivered, and then he allowed the Hasidim to chew on it for an entire week, to study it, to learn it, to absorb it. And a week later, usually on the next Shabbos, he would deliver the next continuation. So he always found a connection from the Torah portion of that week to the subject matter that he was discussing, which to me is actually mind-blowing. How you can take these deepest, most craziest ideas and always find it in the particular Torah portion that you're learning. That means you have to see the parsha in such an elevated state to be able to make these connections. Okay. So here we begin. The Torah portion that we're learning now is Shlach. Now it's interesting, if you know, last one was on Naso. So there's a week in between, which is Bahaloscha. But it seems like the discourse was delivered on Shabbos, Nasai and Bahaloscha. That's why it was a long discourse, the previous one. It was a combination of 2 weeks. So that's why we don't have a discourse starting Bahaloscha, which is one of the third Torah portion in Numbers. We're skipping from the second one, which was Naso, and we're going up to the fourth one, which is Shlach Lecha, which opens up with the story of the spies. When Moses sends the spies to go scout out the land, and we know that there was a devastating story when they came back. They reported negatively on the land, and the whole story that later resulted that the Jewish people had to stay in the desert for 40 years. So now he's going to ask a few questions on the narrative of the story, and he will come back to it after he finishes the 3 chapters and give us a deep understanding, which is going to resolve these questions. Here we go. Shlach lecha Anashim b'Yisroel said it's Canaan. The verse says, send for yourself people, and they should go and scout out the land of Canaan, the land of Canaan. This was God's instruction to Moshe that he should send these people, these scouts or spies, check out the land. Tzarich lahav, we need to understand. So first he asks a question on the general objective of this appointment, of this agency, or of this shlichus, on these messengers, they were dispatched for what purpose? This delegation of spies. Now, usually when a country is going to fight another country, especially if it's interested in conquering a different land, of course it needs to have inside information, and it gets to spy, like Israel is always doing, sending into Lebanon, sending into Syria, sending into all these various places. There are Iranian spies of Israel in Iran, all over the place. It's the only way you have inside information. You need to take care of business. So this goes back as long as there have been warfare. The history of warfare from the beginning of times, there's probably already the beginning of spying. So we understand that if you're going to conquer the land of Canaan, it would be a good idea to send spies so you know the weak points of the enemy, the strong points, where not to attack, to set up a successful strategy of a winning strategy, it's good to know the enemy's how the enemy stands. The question, however, he asks is that is good if you're going to conquer something in a natural way. But if your entire conquest is anyways not based on nature, the Jewish people did not stand a chance militarily against the mighty forces of the kings of the land of Canaan. They did not have the experience. They did not have the weapons. They just would not stand, especially since we learned that there were giants over there, incredible warriors, again, for those days. And the Jews had no chance of even beginning to try to take down these mighty rulers. And obviously they were relying on outright divine assistance, great miracles. Like we find that the sun stopped in the middle of the sky, Joshua stopped the sun, the Jewish people crossed over to the land by the river, being halted, a splitting of the river, a gushing, very springtime river. The river stopped. There was the stopping of the star, of the celestial luminaries in the sky stopped in order to assist them in the war. We find that the wall, the impenetrable wall around Jericho, collapsed miraculously when the Jewish people surrounded it 7 times, 7 days, and then 7 times, and blew a shofar, and God toppled the walls. That's not natural. And then we find also that God fought along with them by casting powerful, huge, big stones came from the sky and rained down and killed the warring armies that were coming against them. So these are just some of those incredible miracles that were going on. We also learned in the Torah that what God was going to send before them bees, poison killer bees, and these bees were stinging them and blinding them. And so again, this whole war was not natural. So if the war is not going to be a natural war, why do you need spies for? That's his question. We need to understand what is the content of sending the spies. The general idea of conquering the land. It was not by natural means. So why do we have this whole sending of the spies, which be something which you do as part of a strategic conquest in which you're relying on your military might? When you're conquering something naturally, it makes sense to do an investigation, to do a spying before, to know the strength and the power of the country that you are coming up against. Which way would be the best way, the most logical way to be able to conquer it? But when you're going to conquer the land of Israel, it's not, which the land of Israel was given to them as a gift by God, and God himself was fighting their battles. It seems like it's not appropriate, it's unnecessary. So if it's unnecessary, why is God making believe that this was going to be a natural war that he's telling them to send spies? Especially since we know the risk of it. Like it turned out that these spies came back and they scared the people, and the people went into a panic. And it only caused mayhem, and God, of course, foresees the future, and it caused the Jewish people to remain in the desert, to delay the entry for 40 years. Plus, we know that because of that, Moses did not come into the land eventually, which later made that the Jewish possession of the land was not permanent, and that's why the consequential exiles came about. And it was all because of this terrible story. So it sounds like a terrible idea. Why is God... now, it does say that although it seems like in the Torah portion that God initiated it, but when we find out later in Deuteronomy, when Moshe repeats the story to the Jewish people, we find out that it was not God's idea. It was the Jewish people who came, and then God only said, if they want to, let them do it. So, fine. But still, he could have explained to them that it's unnecessary. The whole thing will be a miracle, so why bother? So that's the question on the general. Now he's going to pick a little bit at the details. What does it mean? It says you should scout out the land. Word that is more precise in Hebrew for spying. The word that's more precise is called leragel, like the word miraglim, like we call them miraglim. We don't call them mitairim. Mitairim usually means more like tourists, to go tour the land. They weren't going to tour the land. They were going to spy on the land. So the word that should have been used is the word spying. Like it says in Joshua, later, when Joshua sends his 2 spies, before the Jewish people conquer Jericho, he sends in 2 spies, not 12, but 2. And over there, the scripture actually calls them meraglim. But over here, they're not called meraglim, they're called vayasuru. Okay, now, on Moses' instructions, when Moshe relates this, selects the people, and he gives them a briefing before he sets them off on their journey, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them where to go and what to look for, what's their job. So Moshe lists 3 items of what they should come back and report. Those are 3 reports they need to give. 3 articles in the report. What are they? Moshe tells them to look at 3 things. The first thing is see the land. I'm sorry, he doesn't say that. He says you should see the land. But as Rashi interprets, it doesn't mean the land, it means the population on the land. Look at the people. Go see the residents of the land. When it says in the verse, you should see the land, what it is, it's referring to the dwellers of the land, not to look at the soil itself, the conditions of the environment, but rather to look at the people that are there. How do you know that? Like Rashi explains. I think the main proof is because after Moshe says you should see the land what it is, he also tells them again to see the land what it is, and he says, Atoivahu, is it good or bad? And that means if they're good or bad is referring to the soil itself. Are there healthy springs of water, and so on and so forth? What's the situation on the land itself? Is it fertile land? Is it not fertile land? So since he mentions that separately, what can it mean the first time when he says, go see the land? It's referring to the inhabitants of the land. So that's number 1, a report on the people. Beis, ha'aretz atzma. Go see the land itself, the earth itself. What's the land itself like? What's the layout of the land? And what is the land? Is it a good land? Fine, and meaning fertile? What grows there? What doesn't grow there? What kind of terrain is it? Gimel, and then finally he tells them to look at the cities. Ha'arim, what kind of cities do they live in? Open cities, closed cities, fortified cities. And what are the cities like? We need to understand. So he says we need to understand, what do these 3 things really mean? Why is he emphasizing these 3 things? Look at the people that are living there. Look at the earth and the quality of the earth itself, and look at the cities. So what do they mean? Obviously, he's going to explain it not on the literal sense. He's going to give a very deep, godly explanation based on, as we were learning in the discourse. And the other thing is, and then finally the 4th question, when Moshe lists the 3 things that the spies ought to investigate, he uses in each one of them, what is she? Or he says, you should see the land, the cities. Mahi, what is it? What does he keep on saying, ma, what is it? What's this emphasis of what? Okay, that's his questions. And now he jumps right back into the deep, mystical, hidden, godly concepts we were learning earlier. Well, Reuven calls that to understand all of this. Yesh lahagdim. Let's first preface. Mashan is bar, the eldest that we explained earlier. Now, this is still before the chapter begins, the next chapter. He's now going to make a connection and do a quick summary of what we learned in the last discourse, so that we can kick off in chapter 18 with the new exploration. So what did we explain earlier? The oiros, that the lights, the lights, even though they are simple, einam b'pchinas pshitas mamish, they are not utterly simple, k'pshitas Ein Sof, like the simplicity of the inner part of the Ein Sof, of the essence of the Ein Sof, which, as remember we learned, has no relationship to Spheros. Even if it does have relationships to Sphirot, remember we learned, the Spheros would be infinite over there, not 10 Spheros. Shaharei, Ama b'Sefer Yetzirah. And what's the biggest proof that the lights are not utterly simple? They're simple, but they're not utterly simple. Because it says in Sefer Yetzirah, in the book of formation, it says, Esa Spheros Belima. There are 10 Sphirot. And it's referring to the oros, the lights, not the vessels. And it says regarding them, Belima, that they have no substance. So, and that's how we know that it's referring to the lights, not to the vessels. The vessels do have substance. So we're talking about the light that is still very vague and non-substantial. And that itself is, from the fact that it calls it 10 Sphirot, from that you see that the definitions of the Sphirot don't begin in the vessels, they begin in the lights. Because on that very notion, and on that very entity that we say is belima, without substance, we say, which is the lights, not on the vessels do have substance, but the lights, we say on it that it's 10. Now, if it would be utterly simple, a simple energy, then all the energy would be one. What would make it 10? Belima, shagamba oires. Here you see that also in the lights, yesh esespheres. There are 10 attributes. Rakshan belima. It's only that they are considered simple, but without substance, legabe akelim, and compared to the limitations of the vessels. Vinizbar, and then we continue to explain the akav, that the thread of light, which is the origins of the 10 lights. Vinizbar, we explained that the kav, which is the origins of the 10 lights. Gam kimisho kamoisho hu kolul ba'orein sof shalifnei atzimtzum. Even when it is included in the Or Ein Sof, in the infinite light, before the Tzimtzum, Yesh by Esa Spheres, has 10 Spheres. We would think that before the Tzimtzum, there for sure can't be Sphirot. And you guess what we're saying now? No, is what we learned last time. That even in the Or Ein Sof, before the Tzimtzum, which that's the source of the Kav, there are 10 Spheres. Then Esa Spheres HaGnuzos, these are the 10 hidden Spheres, Shen Shoydish Makar HaGvul, which they are the root and the source of limitation. And we explain not the limitation of the vessels, but still the limitation of the lights, begin already with a slight adjustment in the Or Ein Sof, and that's when we mentioned that there are 10 spheres. And then with the last point that we learned was in comparison to this level, which is the lower end of the Or Ein Sof, where there is already a slight adjustment, where there is already a potential for 10 spheros and not infinite spheros, where the light narrows into a potential of 10. So for that we say that the kav, now this is before the tzimtzum, but the kav that emerges after the tzimtzum, it goes from before the tzimtzum out into the post tzimtzum black hole, right? So we say that kav, although it is much lower than its source, from where it comes from, but it's not called yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. Compared to that, we can say it's just revealing something that was there already. Because in the kav, you can smell the 10 sphirot more, the potential for 10 spheros, we can kind of smell the scent of it more than in the Or Ein Sof. In the Or Ein Sof, they are embedded so much in the pure infinite light that you can't even notice it, even with the sharpest sense of smell. It's there, but it's not in any way. But once it's coming out in the kav, you can begin to tap it already, right? But since the Or Ein Sof is the source for it, again, the lower part of the Or Ein Sof, where the Esespheres Agnuz is the source for the kav, that's why the kav is not called yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. It's called Gilu Yahelim, the revelation of the concealed. That's what we learned in the end of last class. The kav is considered the revelation of what is concealed. However, if you're going to measure the kav up to the Or Ein Sof itself, to the infinite light itself, as it's before the internal adjustment, the Or Ein Sof in its real pristine Or Ein Sof state, then the concept, the kav and 10 sphirot that are going to emerge from it are called something from nothing. There is no relationship at all. It's yesh me'ayin. And on that we say, v'chachma me'ayin timatzei. The chachma, compared to keter, which is the same idea, is also considered something from nothing. So, remember we were resolving the atzilus. Is atzilus something from nothing, or is it the continuation of what was before? So we said it's both. When you're measuring it up to the outside of the keter, which is the same idea if you just go higher, to the nether part of the Or Ein Sof, the lower part of the Or Ein Sof. Over there, you can already find subtleties, hidden nuances, which later come into expression. However, if you're measuring it up to the Or Ein Sof itself, or later on to the inside of the Keter, the Pnimius HaKeser, where over there that reflects the concept of the inside of the Or Ein Sof. And on those levels, there is no relationship whatsoever to any bit of sphera of attribute. And when attributes come forth, it's as if it is totally something new. That's what he says over here. Lagaba Or Ein Sof, and compared to the Or Ein Sof, hu be'ein aroch, it is completely inconsequential and not in any relation. That's a summary of what we learned in the entire Maamor, the entire discourse of Nasa Yisroel, the fourth discourse. And now, based on that, he's beginning chapter 18. So let's just learn 2 minutes. We're not going to go too far into chapter 18. And based on this, we can explain a seemingly problematic statement in the Eitz Chaim, which Eitz Chaim, again, is the writings of Reb Chaim Vital, the chief recorder of the teachings of the Holy Ari. And what does he say? There is an implication. The Eitz Chaim implies that hypothetically there could have been the revelation of the light of the Kav without the tzimtzum in the light and its complete withdrawal. What is he referring to? So if you remember, we spoke about this many times, what it says in the Arizal. Initially, when God wanted to make the worlds, he could not make the worlds because all there was just this infinite light and there was no space for anything to exist. Then Hashem made a tzimtzum, and tzimtzum arishon, the first tzimtzum means he retracts his light until there's zero light, there is total empty void, a big black hole. And then into the black hole, he reintroduces the light through a vague kav, a vague little kav. A small little line, a thread. Okay, that's the idea. So Eitz Chaim has a very good question. It says that the vague light that comes back, or the thread of a light that comes back, is of the original light. It's a return of the original light. Yes, albeit in a narrow fashion, but it's a return of the Or Ein Sof. If that's the case, Eitz Chaim says, why did God have to hide the light completely to the degree of zero? That's what he did. He dims the light dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until he shuts the lamp completely. That's what it is. It's not like, we have a light with a dimmer. You can dim it, but it's still a little on. But then when you turn the knob and you hear click, right? It means it's shut off completely. It's exactly what God did. He shut down the light completely. And after we reached to zero, that's when you have a black hole, that's when he reintroduces the light of the Kav. Why did he have to do so? He could have just dimmed his infinite light until all that there is left is that tiny little thread. Since the thread anyways is just a little bit, whatever that means, of the infinite light, so why go to zero? Let's say it's 0.000000000 of whatever that light. But something, then you have a 1, right? Nothing of it, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that light. So why does God have to first shut down and then reveal that tiny fraction? Why doesn't he just leave that light shining, dim the light completely, not completely, until what's left is tolerable to the creation, can serve as the energy for the creation, and fine, and begin that way? What do you have to first go to zero and then start over again? That's the question of the Eitz Chaim. And let's see how he asks the question inside the Rebbe. Eitz Chaim Shar Aleph. In Eitz Chaim Shar Achad, Soif Anaf Gimel. This is in portal number 1 in Eitz Chaim. the end of the branch number 3, Hiksha, he asks over there, Lama haya hatzimtzum ba'ofen kazeh. Why was the tzimtzum? Why was the contraction in such a manner? That the light needed to depart completely. And afterwards, nimshach kav, and afterwards God re-emanates the kav, the thread. God could have just allowed the kav to remain. He could have left the kav in its place. The yisalik, and he should remove shara oira gadol bavad, and he should remove only the rest of the light, which is not going to be part of this ray. It's like imagine hiding the entire sun and just leaving over one ray from the sun. God could have done that. Now, that's a question that the Eitz Chaim says. The Rebbe over here is going to question the question. He's going to object to the objection. And he's going to ask, it seems to be that how can even the Eitz Chaim make such a suggestion? Of course it wouldn't work. But I don't want to... but based on what we learned in the last chapter, he's going to resolve and explain the question of the Eitz Chaim. In other words, he's going to tell us that the question of the Eitz Chaim doesn't make any sense, but without the knowledge of what we learned earlier. But once we know what we learned earlier, then the question makes sense. Okay? Tomorrow, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to pick up on this. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here today.